Hey everybody, it's Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the CURT Class.3 custom fit trailer hitch receiver on our 2019 Mercedes-Benz GLA Class. Now here's what our hitch is going to look like once we have it installed. I think it has a really clean look, and that's mainly because the cross tube is going to be hidden behind the bumper, and the main thing we're going to see is the receiver tube sticking out. Now it is a Class 3, so it is going to offer us that 2-inch by 2-inch receiver tube opening, and it's really going to have the widest variety of options when it comes to accessories that we can mount in our hitch. Obviously everybody knows you can tow a trailer, put a ball mount in there, hook up, but at the same time if we want to take a trip to the park, maybe with some friends or some family, we can put a bike rack in there, take some bikes with us, or if we want to go on a road trip and we need as much room as we can inside our Mercedes, put a cargo carrier back here and transport some gear on the outside of the vehicle, making more room for passengers and pets. But however we're going to be using our hitch, all of our accessories are going to mount to the hitch pin hole here on the side. Now the hitch is going to accept a standard 5/8 pin and clip. Now these aren't going to come with the hitch, but you can find them here at etrailer.com, along with some locking devices to keep your accessories secure inside the receiver tube, and anti-rattle devices to cut down on the annoying rattling sound coming from the back of the tube while we're driving. If you are going to be doing some towing, maybe you have a small trailer, you're going down to the lake, you're going to take a jet ski with you, maybe you just run into the hardware store and you need to pick up some mulch or something. Whenever you pull a trailer, you have to have a spot for your safety chains. And here we're going to have a loop style welded to the bottom of the receiver tube. And if you have what I consider most normal size hooks, we'll have plenty of room to get them hooked on, take them off. We don't have to worry about even coming close to the bottom of a Mercedes, so no worry about scratches or any kind of interference. And even if you have those really large oversized hooks like these, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have plenty of room to get them on and off, not have to worry about any kind of interference or potentially scratching the bottom of our car. Now as far as the weight capacity goes, it's a pretty important thing when you're looking at a hitch because you want to make sure that it's going to be up to the task that we put it to. As far as the tongue weight goes, that's going to be the maximum downward force at the end of the receiver tube. It's going to have a 600-pound rating. Now that's a pretty decent amount. We're going to be able to carry 4, 5, maybe even 6 bikes with us, or if we're using it for a cargo carrier, we're really going to be able to maximize the amount that we can carry with some of the really large carriers. Now at the same time, our hitch is going to be rated for 4,000 pounds of gross trailer weight rating. That's how much the hitch can pull, but that does include the trailer and the load we have on it. So you do want to double check your Mercedes owner's manual because those are the ratings for the hitch, and we don't want to exceed the manufacturer's rating for our car. Now, I know there's one thing that a lot of customers want to know about, and it's if their hands-free liftgate is going to work with the hitch in place. And it does work, but obviously we can't put our foot right where the receiver tube is, so we're just going to have to go to either side, but it is still going to completely work. It's not going to affect it in any way. You can still open it up on the driver's side. And once we get it closed, I'll show you that it still even works on both sides of the hitch. Again, we just got to move to the outside. Now I'd like to give you a few measurements, and these are going to help you whenever you're looking for accessories for your new hitch, like a ball mount, bike rack, or even a cargo carrier. From the center of the hitch pin hole to the outermost edge of the bumper is going to be right about 4.5 inches. Now that measurement is going to help when you're looking at folding accessories to make sure you have adequate room to put them in the upright stored position and not make contact with the rear bumper. From the ground to the inside top edge of the receiver tube opening is right about 12.75 inches. Now at that height, I would definitely recommend a bike rack or a cargo carrier that has a raised shank. That way we can get a little bit more ground clearance out of it, but at the same time that measurement's going to help you when you're looking for a ball mount so you can find the appropriate rise or drop and match it up to your trailer. But now that we've seen what our hitch looks like and gone over some of the features, let's bring our Mercedes in the shop, go over the installation process together so you can have the confidence to do it at home. To begin our installation, we want to open up the rear hatch on our Mercedes, and we're going to move over to the side where we're going to find an interior panel that'll give us access to the rear of the taillight. We're going to have this large panel over here on the driver's side. We'll have this little turn knob. You just do a quarter turn, and we can tilt it out and then pull that panel out of the slot. Now if we look into the panel here, we're going to find a turn knob. It's a little wing nut. That's actually what's holding the tail light in place, and you should be able to grab it with your hand and start loosening it up until we get that turn knob all the way out. And once we get it out, we can pull it out and we'll just set it aside. So then you want to grab underneath the top edge of the taillight and we'll pull straight back because there are some alignment pins in here and we don't want them to break. We don't want to pull too far to the side because these tabs will break. So you just want to grab on top here and pull back. And if we look at the back of our taillight, we're going to have a connector. Now there's a little squeeze tab that's going to be on top. It's a little small. Try to get your finger in there, but we want to squeeze that tab so we can pull the connector out. Then we can set our taillight aside where it won't get damaged. Now we need to pull the passenger side taillight out as well. It's going to be a little bit different, but we still have an access panel. It's just much smaller. There's no turn knob, so you just want to grab the panel, kind of pull it out, and we can work that small tab out of the little notch, and then we'll have another white turn knob on the inside with that wing nut. And we'll pull our other taillight out and disconnect the wiring the same way. Now we want to move to the rear wheel well, right behind the rear tire. On the inside of the trim piece here, we're going to have a few fasteners that we're going to have to pull out. There's going to be one that's right at the corner of where the fender meets the fascia, but kind of up in the wheel well liner itself. So you want to grab a 10mm socket and pull that bolt out. The bolt is going up, so the head of the bolt's going to be on the bottom here. Now if we move towards the bottom, pretty close to where that seam is, where that trim piece meets the lower section, there's going to be a push pin that's, again, kind of recessed inside the liner there. It's going to be a little bit hard to see, but there's a center section of the push pin that needs to be pulled out first. So you want to take a flathead screwdriver and we're going to pry out the center section of the push pin first. We should be able to come underneath the base of it and pull the rest of it out. Once we have that push pin pulled out, we're going to pull the other one out of the other side as well as that bolt up top. Now we want to release this trim piece that's going along the edge of the rear wheel. Now I will let you know we're going to start at the bottom here, but as we're releasing the clips and loosening it up, we want to stop once we get to where the fender meets the fascia, because this lower section here has clips that are going into the body to hold it in place. But once you get to about where the fender meets the fascia, there's just double-sided tape that's holding it on, so you don't want to pull too fast or go too far, because then we're going to have to replace the tape that holds it in the upper section. So we're only going to be loosening this section here. And the easiest way I found is if you take a really small flat blade screwdriver, you can kind of come underneath the panel here, and we want to pull away. It is going to be extremely tight in this area, but we need to pull the black plastic piece away from the painted section and that lower section here. But again, once you get to right about here, you want to stop. So there's just going to be a few clips, but again, they are pretty tight. So you kind of want to hold the back of the body here while you're pulling this away to kind of separate the two of them. We want to pull the other side loose on the other trim piece on the driver's side as well. Now on each side right behind the tire on the lower section of the fascia, we're going to have a few push pins and a bolt that's holding all this in place. So you want to grab a trim panel tool or a flat blade screwdriver. We're going to pull all three of those push pins out. Again, these are going to work just like that one in the wheel well liner, where you want to pry the center section out first. It'll take the tension off, and then we'll pull the base of the push pin out. Now we're going to have these three push pins on both sides, so we want to take them out over here as well as the other side. Now for the bolt over here, we're going to use a 10mm socket to pull that out. That's going to be the same size for the one on the other side as well. Now if we move towards the center, right in behind our muffler, towards the back of the bumper, there's a hole that's actually in the heat shield, and if we look up, we're going to find two more bolts, one on each side, that's holding the fascia to the supports. So we want to grab a 10mm socket and pull both of those bolts out. So you're going to want to pull out the floor coverings, or at least lift up the lid so we can get access to the threshold underneath. And at the very back ledge, we're going to have these tie-down hooks. You're going to take a flat blade screwdriver, we're going to pop the cover off. That'll expose the bolt underneath so we can pull all of those out. So we're going to grab a T40 Torx bit, and we're going to remove the bolt that's holding the tie-down hook down. And we are going to have one on each side, so we want to move to the other side and pull that out as well. Then right in the middle, right underneath the latch, we're going to have another bolt. This time we want to use a 10mm socket to pull it out. Then we want to grab the bottom of the threshold. We're going to lift up, working our way across. Kind of slide it towards the front of the car, then we can pull it out. Now this next step is going to require you to have a swiveling ratcheting wrench, or at least something that can swivel, maybe a crow's foot, so you have a 90-degree angle, because we're going to move in to where we just removed that threshold. There's actually a rubber grommet towards the back of the bumper area, and there's a recessed bolt that we need to remove, one on each side. So you can reach back and pull out the grommet. And if you look inside there, you'll see that stud. Well, I don't have a socket or a ratchet that is that long and able to pass through all the way, but if you have a pass-through socket, it will work. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ratcheting wrench, and that way I have enough room. Just break it loose, and we can just start working the nut at least a little closer to the end. Then we can always grab a magnet to pull it the rest of the way out. Now we are going to have another grommet with the same bolt on the other side of the latch mechanism, so we want to pull that one out as well. Now at this point I recommend getting an extra set of hands because we're going to remove our fascia. We're going to start at the corner where the fender meets the fascia, and we're going to start peeling the fascia away. Now once you get to about the taillight area, there are some tabs, so you may want to kind of push on them as you're pulling the fascia away, potentially grabbing from the bottom to unlock some of the tabs. And once you get to the center section, you may have to loosen it, kind of wiggle it around to loosen up those studs if they are catching. Now we're going to have some wiring that we're going to have to disconnect. It's going to be on the passenger side. We're going to have a connector right behind the bumper beam. We're going to pull out that gray tab to unlock it. We'll squeeze down the connector. Should be able to pull the two connectors apart. Then we want to set our fascia aside where it won't get damaged. Our next step is going to be lowering the exhaust down, but we don't want to lower down so far that it causes any damage. So I'm going to put a support strap up. Just want to find a solid point on the vehicle to connect it. We can cinch it down so we can lower it slowly once we loosen up all the hangers. On each side of the muffler, right by the tailpipe, if you look straight up at the frame, you'll find a hanger, and it's actually bolted to the frame, so it's pretty easy to remove. We don't have to worry about the rubber isolators at all. It's just going to be held in by one bolt. However, if you look at that bolt, it's actually an external Torx bolt, but most of us don't have those. But what you can use is a 12-point 10mm socket. It'll fit right over the bolt. We can loosen it up and take one out of each side. Then we can just slowly loosen that strap so we get a little bit of room and a little bit of slack so we can gain access to the heat shield above the muffler. I want to temporarily lower our heat shield down. We don't necessarily need to really take it all the way out, but we need to pull it down and at least have it sitting on the exhaust so it's out of the way. Now we're going to have one bolt on each side and then 4 directly above the muffler. So I'm going to use an 8mm socket and pull all of the nuts out. Here we don't need to pull it all the way out. If you want to, you can, but we just need to make sure we have enough room so that we get access and potentially trim this if we need to. So at this point we can get ready to remove the actual bumper structure itself. Now each side is going to be held on by 4 studs. It's going to be going through the body, and the nuts are actually behind this panel here. So we're going to grab a 16mm socket and pull all 4 of those out on each side. And once you have all 4 nuts removed, you should be able to grab your bumper beam, and you're going to kind of have to wiggle it because there is some sealant that's attached to it. And before you pull it too far away, just be mindful that we do have that wiring that's right there. So you're probably going to have to pull the plastic push pins out. You just take a flat blade screwdriver, trim panel tool, or possibly even just your hand. And you're going to want to pull all of the wiring out. That way we can pull the bumper beam off and set it aside. Now this next step isn't completely necessary, but I would like to get a really good seal on our hitch and bumper beam when it gets put back in place. So I'm just going to take a putty knife. I'm just going to go through and kind of clean off this excess foam tape. Again, just so we can make sure we have a really good seal and that we don't have to worry about the bolts loosening up or anything. That way we know everything's going to be torqued down properly. We don't have all this excess material. So we'll just do this on both sides. Make sure the edge is nice and clean. So now we want to grab our hitch and we're going to stand it up like this so the receiver tube's on the ground and those side plates are facing towards our vehicle. Now we're going to take our bumper beam, get it in front of our hitch, and we're going to actually take the studs and sandwich our hitch so those studs will go through and just line up right with the hitch and the bumper beam. And then I do suggest getting an extra set of hands because the hitch and the bumper beam can be a little cumbersome trying to hold everything up. We're going to slide it back into the factory position. You want to get at least one of the nuts started on each side. That way the hitch and bumper beam will hold itself up and we can work on putting the rest of the factory hardware back in place. And we want to grab that same 16mm socket and tighten up all the nuts. Then you're going to come back with a torque wrench and you're going to torque all the hardware down to the specified amount in the instructions. You just want to go back and repeat that for all your remaining hardware. So with the hitch torqued down, we can start putting our panels back in and putting the heat shield back in place. Now the heat shield may need some trimming, but it just kind of depends on if we can get it back in place, get the fasteners back in, and if it's touching the hitch or not. So we're just going to lift it up. So the heat shield is barely touching the hitch right here at the very back. So we have the option of either trimming this out, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend the heat shield up, kind of push it out of the way, because it's really not touching that much, and we still have plenty of room here where it's not going to be interfering. So I'm going to just start putting all the fasteners back in, holding the heat shield in place. Now we can go ahead and lift our exhaust back up and just reinsert the factory bolts on each side. We can tighten them down using that 12-point 10mm socket. Now we can get ready to put our fascia back in place. However, the fascia may need to be trimmed. If we look at the bottom of the fascia here, right where the hitch is going to be coming out, there's actually a plastic panel that spans the center section. You can actually go ahead and pull that out. It may prevent us from having to trim the actual fascia itself. So on each side, there's a bolt holding it in place. So let's grab an 8mm socket. We can pull them both out. You just want to grab that piece and lift up, and again, we'll just slide right out. But we don't want to leave these screws out because they actually hold the support in place. So we're just going to go ahead and put those screws back in place. So now we can take our fascia, we're going to line up those 2 large studs, and if we can get our fascia back in place without forcing it too much, we just continue to put everything back, but we do want to dry fit it, kind of test it to make sure it will go back in and we don't have to trim anything. And once you get your fascia back in place, it's really just a matter of reversing the orders, putting all those fasteners back in place, and putting the taillights back in. Now I do want to mention, Again, we got our fascia in place without having to trim, but it was pulling on the bottom of it really tight, and it really didn't look as nice as I wanted it to. So I ended up taking a razor knife and just on either side of the hitch, just made a couple score marks and then connected them going across so that the fascia could go back where it needed to go, and just very, very minor trimming. Again, it's not necessary, but I think it looks a little bit nicer and the fascia goes back up where it's supposed to be rather than pulling down real tight and having a bulge right there. That'll finish up your installation and your look at the CURT Class 3 custom fit trailer hitch receiver on our 2019 Mercedes-Benz GLA.